Hello there, and welcome to part 3 of version control for scientists. We've already had part 1, which looked at Git, part 2, which looked at curvenote for the Jupyter Notebook and paper versioning, and now we're going to look at the other end of the workflow to look at data versioning. And now data versioning, I think, is still definitely an ongoing area. Recently, I found a tool called DVC, which looks amazing in terms of what it can do. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to just have a look at that. It's very early in my usage of it, so I haven't done much with it at all yet, but I want to share what I've found and look at that because it's really interesting. So I guess for context here, what we're aiming for is being able to build out a reproducible workflow for a paper or a publication or a report or something, or a thesis or something like that. And really, in that reproducible workflow, we want to be able to go all the way to a report and have a consistent version control and a consistent provenance or tracking history of everything that led up to that report. So at the end of the day, I can go to that report, look at its Git hash or stamp or version number, and then know exactly what the rest of these pieces were, to know which notebook was used, which version of a notebook, which version of a code, which version of an environment and its dependencies, and which version of a particular data set. And so we're starting to get closer to that by being able to use Git as a sort of versioning for code and a sort of glue layer between other versioning control systems like curvenote that stamps version tags into notebooks, and DVC, which also stamps versioning information into your GitHub repo. So this is really interesting that we can potentially get a single Git timestamp or a single Git commit hash, bringing together all of the aspects of the workflow by incorporating these other version control systems. So let's have a look at DVC. Let me flip back up here. So data versioning with DVC. DVC does a lot more than data versioning. It's from a company who are building out software for machine learning versioning and machine learning data pipelining management and provisioning, etc. And DVC is one of their products. It's an open core product. It's an open source product with an open core model, I think. And we have a version control, and it provides a version control system that works on your command line. So it gives you another command line thing to use, but it's pretty well aligned with Git and it's pretty simple to, it's similar to Git in terms of if you're using Git on the command line, then you're going to be able to learn and use DVC. The docs are great, so and very easy to jump into. So I'm going to show that on a piece of code that I showed in the last video. So I'm going to go back to my seismic notebook. So I have my seismic notebook, T21 seismic notebook repository checked out. In that, I have a README and environment file and this notebook that I've been working on. I think I still have Jupyter Lab running, but basically I have my local environment set up. I have the I have my local environment set up in this folder, so I'm fine to go ahead and run Jupyter Lab to have a look at that notebook. And if I flip back to here, I can see that, of course, I don't have any data in this directory because my data in this case is a segY file. It's a 50 megabyte subset cut out of the F3 Netherlands data set. And I don't want to put that in my repository. So that is actually stored a level up in this data folder here. And so it's outside of version control. If I click in here, you can see that I'm loading this from there. And what I actually want to do is I want to be able to load, actually pull my data into my repository and version it. And DVC is going to let me do that. And let's take a closer look. So DVC what? So I've already installed DVC. You can install it via pip, but I just went ahead and got the download for macOS. There's a whole bunch of different platforms. It comes in by a brew, but I just downloaded. So I've got DVC on here. So if I DVC, I don't know, version, is that going to do something? Slow, it's thinking. Yeah, okay. So DVC is installed, okay. And I'm going to turn my video off because that's obscuring the bottom corner here. And I'm probably going to actually, let me just lift that away from the bottom of it. Okay. Zoom in a bit more. Yeah, good. So, what we're going to do now is I'm in my Git repository. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize my Git repository as also a DVC repository. So when I do DVC init, here we go. We've initialized. We can now commit the changes to Git. So it's done a bunch of stuff. Let's see what it's done. ls minus l. Doesn't look like it's done anything. ls minus la. And we can see we've got a few things going on. We've got a DVC folder that's been added, and it's storing a bunch of metadata. In fact, in that folder, there's a git ignore, a config, plots, and temp. Interesting. And it's also put a DVC ignore file in, I guess to tell DVC to ignore certain things. I haven't used that yet. Okay, so that is essentially the DVC repository alongside my Git repository. Great. So we've initialized, and now I can go ahead and commit. It's asking me to commit. And now I've committed DVC. I'm guessing that is going to add, yeah, so that's added my DVC directory. And we've got all this now DVC metadata as part of my GitHub repo. So as I move forward and keep committing in Git, whilst I'm using DVC, I'm going to be continually updating the metadata. Cool. So where I'm actually going to store some stuff. So when you look at the Git docs, sorry, the DVC docs, they store stuff in a whole bunch of places. They have support for all these different areas. Really in production, I'd be looking for something like S3 or Google Cloud Storage or Azure Blob Storage. Those would be the best targets, but look, it supports Drive, supports all sorts of stuff. No OSDU yet, but you know, let's see. But I think for simplicity and maybe accessibility for most people, we can go for this Google Drive. So what I've done in Google Drive is I've gone and set up a folder on my Google Drive, and it's Transform21, DVC repo, great. And initialize, well, we've already initialized, so I skipped ahead down that bit a bit. So now I'm going to add a remote. So this feels very like Git, doesn't it? So I'm going to do a DVC remote add my drive and a G drive protocol, and then I need this code here. Now this code is actually my folder hash that appears up here. So if I copy that and put that there, right, I now have a remote DVC remote list. Was that the command? Yes, it was. So now I have a remote my drive pointing to there. Excellent. Cool. So now I've initialized the repository, I've configured the remote, and now I'm going to get my data into my repository. So let's do copy my whole data folder into this folder. Now I have that. Okay. Oh no, I messed up there. RM F3 seismic. I think I messed up there because of that slash, did I? Yeah. So now I have a data folder with my seismic in. If I do a git status, it's going to tell me it wants to add that data folder. But I know if I do a git add now, it's going to add my seismic file, which I don't want. So let's hold off that. Instead, what I'm going to do is we're going to tell DVC to add the data. So DVC add data, and data here is referring to the data directory, of course. Awesome. Right, cool. So we've added the data. It said add. Has anything popped up in here yet? No, there's nothing in my GitHub yet. And I think that's because we've added now to a staging area. Just like we have a staging area in Git, we've added to sort of DVC's staging area. And now it's asking me to actually do, to track the changes with Git. So let's do a git status to see. Yeah, this DVC is new, so that's why it's asking me to add that. The git ignore already knows about, but let's just do a git add dot anyway, which I'd normally do. Status and see what git wants to add now. So it wants to add the config, my git ignore, and the DVC. So let's let it git. But why? Where's my data directory? Where's my data? Why is my data directory not there? Let's pop in here and have a look at this git ignore. Yeah. So DVC added data to our git ignore directory. So what's happening is DVC is managing the contents of my git ignore, telling it to ignore the data that I add, which is kind of handy. So let's do a git commit and just say that added F3 seismic. Yeah, let's not quite do that yet. We could do that, but let's actually just make sure that my notebook still runs. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to I'm going to actually point it to data in my repository directory. Yeah, it does. Good. I'm committing to Git, so I'm going to clear my outputs. I'm going to just save a version of that to curvenote quickly to keep that up to date with my data. That's done. And then I'm going to do that git commit and added F3 seismic. Oh, and now I'm going to do a git push. Great, so I versioned the Git, but where's my data? I think there's still something to do. So I've pushed to Git, I've committed to Git, and now I need to do a DVC push. So let's do that. DVC push, please. And what that's going to do is that's going to push from my staging area now into my repository. So it looks like I couldn't do that because it's telling me that I didn't specify my remote. But hold on, I added a remote, so there's a remote there, fine. But I haven't actually specified it. So a little bit like in Git, if I want to push to a particular branch, I haven't set my upstream, I have to name it. And I think that's what's going on here. So it's asking me to either define my default remote or to push to a given remote that I name. Let's go ahead and try defining my default as my drive. Cool. And now let's do a DVC push. Whoa. Okay, so it's doing something. Now, because I have actually specified Google Drive, but I haven't actually done anything about configuration or authorization, have I? So it's actually now trying to help me out get authorized. So let me open this link. It's taken me up to a Google sign-in. It's asking that it wants to be able to see, edit, create, and delete all my Google Drive files, which is a little bit scary, but I'm gonna trust it. See, create, and delete its own configuration data. Well, that's what we wanted to do. I'm just going to say yes, because I do trust DVC. Cool. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to go and paste here. And authentication successful. And it's off uploading my data. Now, obviously, that was a big leap there in terms of giving it full access to my Google Drive. But that's, I think, with the drive-based route. There could be ways to get around that and other ways to authenticate Drive. But I think that's why, if you're going to use this in anger, that you would probably go up and use AWS, Azure, or cloud storage, where you're going to have a better, more rigorous authentication workflow, based around access rights and proper permissions to just one bucket, and being able to get an API key locally in order for you to be able to authenticate with DVC. So obviously, that's a much better route, and you're going to have much more control over what DVC's got access to. Awesome. Well, I've already committed. Now, let's just do git status again. Does the push affect anything? Yeah, push has changed the DVC config. So I think we should be committing after your push to DVC. So F3 dataset pushed to DVC. Awesome. Cool. So there we go. Now we have git push. Now we have a version of a notebook, a version of its code in a GitHub repository with the version information related to the seismic data set stamped into the GitHub repository, and also the information about the notebook and the version of the notebook last run stamped into the repository too. So I think there's still some edges and things to work out about this, but with these tools, we're getting closer and closer to be able to, have this reproducible workflow. I can't wait to learn more about DVC. I suggest if you want to learn more, including, which I'm not going to show here, what happens when you start updating your data, what happens when you want to pool specific versions of data, etc. But the docs around DVC are great, so I recommend going to go and look through those. Great. So that was it. I'm going to leave it there. And any other questions, chat, come find me in Slack, either just in Slack or in the T21 Thurs source control chat. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And keep chatting about all this stuff. It's very interesting. So great. That's all. Thank you.